Well, Jules, thank you so much for having me. Um, as you've mentioned, my name is Justice Online, Ruby in real life. And I'm a consultant by day, curator by night. And yeah, sometimes Gallery started, I think, in 2018 as a way for me to showcase a collection or a series of digital artists that I really liked from different online communities. And sort of furthering research into this idea of what is an online community, what is like art that is made within the frames of either Discords, Facebook groups, Tumblrs, and I've been spending the last few years sort of, well, before this, traveling, talking about it, and presenting work. And also I'm an artist. So I also make work, and some of my work is digital, which brings me to my first thing, which is that I make digital art. That's why this is very interesting to me. I also make physical art, and I collect physical art. So that's why this is very, very interesting to me as a person who is like investing time and resources into this area. I think we can do like a show of hands. How many people are familiar with digital art, or who are like in a media studies or intermedia studies major graduate program, or just do it for fun? I think there's a raise your hand thing on Zoom.
Yeah, there's a raise your hand or a thumbs up button. 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4,
That's good.
5,
That's good.
7.
So you're probably familiar with the conundrum of making digital art. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my introduction with it. So I arrived on the scene, quote unquote, through memes. And so I was making memes, and as memes became more prominent in the cultural zeitgeist, there came like a desire to both curate them and also preserve them. And that's what when I first sort of jumped into the conversation. And that was like the first, one of my first interactions with digital art. And then in 2018, after I started Sometimes Gallery, I met Harm van der Dorpel in Miami, and I had the wonderful chance. He's a wonderful individual who started one of the first blockchain-driven galleries, which is called Left Gallery, and we collaborated on a piece together, which was presented on Left Gallery and was presented in Berlin, which was also linked to a token. So that was my first introduction to that kind of work, where the authenticity of a piece is linked to a token which resides on a blockchain. We'll be talking a lot about this. We're going to talk about sort of the backdrop of sort of physical art as we know it, and how that has evolved into this wonderful sort of very effervescent market of digital art right now. And one thing that's very interesting about finance and economics, that the people who work in finance and economics, for some reason, because of our system now, it's sort of framed, tend to have a lot of resources, and collectors. And this is something that I'm going to talk about when I talk about video art, and how collecting video art influenced sort of the issues that I see in the collecting of digital art. A lot of these things come from people, unfortunately, who are collectors and who want to know what their rights are about these specific pieces. So I'm going to begin by talking about markets and everything. It is no surprise to most people involved in artistic endeavors that the art world seems to increasingly serve its financial masters. In her recent docuseries, writer and critic Fran Lebowitz talks about how during auctions, when people see a Picasso, they watch it appear and they're silent. And when the final price is educated and the gavel sounds, that's when people applaud. The transaction is celebrated and not the work, which seems to be sort of the conclusion of the grand neoliberal project, sort of the extended flattening of everything into just a series of numbers, which we call valuations. There are two, this is a Jean Baudrillard quote, there are two art markets today. One that is still regulated by a hierarchy of values, even if these are already of a speculative kind. The other resembles nothing so much as a floating, uncontrollable capital in the financial market. It is pure speculation, a movement for movement's sake, with no apparent purpose other than to defy the law of value. The second market has much in common with poker or potlatch. It is a kind of space opera in the hyperspace of value. Should be scandalized? No. There's nothing immoral here. Just as present day art is beyond beautiful and ugly, the market for its part is beyond good and evil. And this is a bit what we're going to be talking about, this hyperspace of value and how value is constructed in the art world and how that value is transferred within the realm of the digital. This is an index, which means it tracks the valuations of different types of art for the last, say, 20 years, 2 decades. As you can see, the most popular kinds of art right now in terms of value are post-war and contemporary. This is the art price, another index, which takes the 100 top artists, alive or dead, and ranks the valuation of their pieces over a period of time. The arrival of indexes for art is a big thing because it pushes the sort of logic of financialization into basically grouping together a series of artists that have high valuations and then sort of tracking their prices compared to the S&P 500, which is an index of the 500 top companies in the US. These are the names of the artists. I want to do a little game. If you could identify, they're actually in order of evaluations. If you could identify some of the names in there, you can type it in. It's like a word scramble. Yes. I mean, the Picasso, Warhol is like the 2 big ones in the front there. You have Cézanne, Pollock, Mitchell, a bunch of them, Rodin. Supply and demand, just basic economics. And we're going to see how this relates to the art world. The reason why these names are so valuable, especially for people like Picasso and Warhol, they are dead. They're dead, which means that they can no longer create new works. This means that the supply is restricted. There's only a fixed amount of pieces, and the demand, however, increases. Why does the demand increase? Well, we have growing riches. So rich people are getting richer. They have more resources. And though the middle class in the Western world seems to be disappearing, in emerging economies, we have actually a growing middle class, which is having access to capital, which can also purchase some of these pieces. So we have increased demand and restricted supply. Is that okay? So this begs the question, in terms of economics, what is art? Is art equity? Is it a commodity or is it an asset? Equity being part of a company or of a thing of which you have a certain value. Commodity being something that you exchange on a daily basis, or asset being a good, more of a long-term good, which you keep and which tends to increase in value over time. Art has always historically been a store of value. Now, what I assert in this essay is that, like, yes.
Could you give just like a short kind of concrete example of equity, commodity, and an asset? Just like 3 objects that those might map onto?
Equity being like a share of the company Apple. That is equity. So, and I'm going to get to this, how this relates to the art world. So when you buy a share of Apple, it's about $140 US right now. You own a piece of that company. A commodity being this piece of cream, which I can buy at the store and I can exchange quite rapidly. An asset being like this condo, something a bit more long-term, which is something which somebody owns and tends to be over more than a year or something like that. It's not readily exchangeable. Gold is like an example of an asset. Gold, silver, metals, and for some people, Bitcoin. This is an example of that. art has always historically been a store of value, just different kinds of value. And I sort of lean on Adorno and Benjamin here. So first, we have sort of the spiritual value of art. Then we move to the cultural, the political, and then everything sort of subsumed into the financial valuation of art. And this last little line here sort of implies that everything that is financial is a matter of faith, and essentially, because you have to believe in these valuations, you have to believe in these things, and so they become spiritual in that we don't fully understand how they work, but we believe in them. So this is a cave drawing of the Sand People of Africa, sort of contemporary with the Lascaux drawings, but Williams and Clotes, when they talk about these drawings, are very clear that these are spiritual in nature. They represent people dancing, where the animals are sort of larger than the humans. There is a lot of spirituality imbued in these creations, these artistic creations. Then we move to this idea of art as being cultural. So the first one, this is a Roman statue, which was perhaps more religious, of Venus Pudica, so like a Venus hiding herself. So from the religious, so to the cultural, this is the birth of Venus, which perhaps harkens more to the culture of Greek and Roman antiquity more than to the religious aspect of it. And then we have art as being sort of political, as being a tool for propaganda, for carrying ideas. We have constructivist art on the left, which is like has a clear mission of showcasing an alternate vision of the world. We have the futurist Boccioni here, which of course is like this idea of like technology taking over. And then we have the last one, which, depending on your familiarity with the work and the new research that's been done on this, a lot of modern art has this function of propagating the canon of great Western art. And that was the idea behind abstract expressionism, which was funded by the government to, around the world, spread the cultural hegemony through art, basically, of the Western world. Of course, in contrast at the time with communist or Russian or Soviet art. So this is, the transition from spiritual to cultural to political, and finally to financial. Does anybody know has anybody seen Tenet? No, Tenet it's the new Christopher Nolan movie, whatever, but they're in a free port. A free port is a place where very rich people keep their art. The reason why they do this is to avoid taxation. And so when the art is kept in a free port, they can exchange it without being taxed. Because if you sell a piece of art here for $1 million, you'll be taxed just like with any other good. The free port represents, in the progression of the economics of art, the point wherein art becomes purely financial. What do I mean by that? I mean that this is Mikey D from the Beastie Boys, and this is his mother, who's actually a big time collector. If you did not know, she has like a humongous collection. But people, when they used to buy art, used to keep it for a very long time. It was an asset, meaning that you had it in your house, you had it in your whatever mansion, blah, 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 but you kept it for a fairly long time. It was a long-term asset. What the free port allows is quick transactions on art that move it from asset to commodity, because when it's in the free port, you could sell it to another rich people another rich person in the free port quite fast, and then reap the gains, reap the profits of that, and just keep that flow of goods going. Art is produced as a commodity, doesn't become it's sold. What the free port, or what the financialization of the art world allows, is for the goods to become from illiquid to liquid. What that means, an illiquid good means that it takes a long time to sell, meaning that if I want to sell a gigantic piece of art usually takes me quite a while. But when everything is in a free port, everything is on an index or in the market, I'm able to sell it much more fast, making it quote unquote liquid. And this is the sort of end game of the financial world, making everything, every good liquid. We can transact it in an instant. So we go from assets, something you keep for a very, very, very long time, to commodity, something that you can exchange in a free port at sort of high speeds, to, and this is my thesis, to a theory of equity. So when you buy a piece of art now, you buy into the equity of the artist. And I will sort of touch upon how web platforms enable us to invest in artists as if they were sort of corporations or companies. How much did you pay for that? That's the big question that was very, very hard to answer in the past. There were three big issues with sort of the pre-internet art market. First one, opacity. Second one, barrier to entry. And the third one, as I've just mentioned, liquidity. Opacity. Lack of publicly available historical data makes it hard to ascertain provenance and authenticity. When you go and you see a piece, it is hard to know what the price was. It is hard to know what similar pieces are worth. Unless you had some friends in galleries, you could go to the public records, but it was not readily available to folks. Opacity creates an information asymmetry, which means that people who are in power, sort of gallerists or people in museums who are selling these pieces, had all the information. They knew what it was worth. They knew what the previous prices were. Whereas as a buyer, you perhaps didn't have this information. This created a seller advantage. And this is, in economics, this is what you want to avoid. That's what the quote unquote free market, the idea is that it allows for a perfect system in which both neither the seller nor the buyer has an advantage. Barrier to entry. There's a high cost to start a collection, as well as you need social capital to access the market. If you've tried to buy art, you know that not only do you need the money, you know, I win the lottery tomorrow, I can't just go in and buy Picasso. Sometimes you need access to the artist. The gallerists will only sell you if they know that you're a renowned collector, for instance. And lastly, logistics. This is a big part as well. If I buy a humongous painting, getting it from France to Montreal is a big issue. It's something that people don't necessarily know how to deal with. And liquidity. It's hard to sell on a whim. I got this gigantic Pollock in my house, you know. Do you know someone who might need a Monet? Can I just flip that real quick? Probably not. What we used to do to sell is direct sales. So you knew another person of wealth, you sold it to them. You had galleries do sometimes sell of certain collections, auctions, and you had proxies, these art advisor people who we don't quite know what they do, but they always seem to have, you always see them at the art fairs. Come in Web 2.5, just like between 2.0 and 3.0. The opacity, how does that fix that? So people have used machine learning and big data to aggregate all past art data. So they will, scan a bunch of records and put that into their platforms and be able to provide their users a wide array of previously very opaque data. The second thing they do is you can now buy art from very renowned artists on a few clicks. It's an open marketplace. You do not need to know the gallerist. You don't need to know the artist to buy their work if they're available on these platforms. This is somewhat more democratic. And liquidity, the marketplace is two-sided, enabling both users and institutions to sell the pieces. When I want to sell my piece, I can actually just put it back on the platform and sell it. And this is sort of an overall graph of what I call the online marketplace virtuous cycle. So these are the economics of online marketplaces. This works as much for Amazon as it works for Artsy and ArtSpace. And I don't know if you've been on these new platforms where you can actually buy pieces for even like multiples of thousands of dollars. So the online marketplace are not only places to buy and sell things, but what is crucial about them is that they're also data farms. They identify user behavior, what they're looking at, what they want to buy, what they put on their wish list, in order to not only get more users, but to also to provide better advertising. And when you go on, you talk about something, you go on Amazon and you see the thing is like the first thing you see on there. Same thing can happen with these art platforms. More specifically, these art platforms use the data that multiple of customers see to advise their high-value customers in their next purchases. If they know that a bunch of people are looking at a specific artist, this indicates that there is some engouement, there is some interest in that artist. This is how usually future value is sort of quantified by something like ArtRank or Artsy. We're looking at viewership, how many people are looking at the piece, is it hype, how many publications are talking about it, and sellability. So these literal metrics, what they mean, this is page views. How many views for the pieces of the artist? Second, hype. You have sort of crawlers that go on the web. How many articles are being written about this artist? And these are all things that we can quantify. Sellability, when a piece is put on the market, what is the duration of time? How long is it on the website before it is sold? And all this are indicators of future value. Which is sort of the new, this is how like ArtRank sort of ranks both dead and alive artists as they're advising people to buy or sell them. That's what I just explained. How do we quantify them? Quantification leads to financializations, and financialization leads to securitization. What I mean by that is that once you have all this data on artists, and this is still within the realm of physical art, you are able to make securities out of them. Securities is like a stock. It is a thing, a financial instrument, which you can trade even faster than the actual thing itself. This is a thing called Otis. Otis allows you to buy a fractional ownership equity in, say, a Warhol. So the piece is $20 million. You can buy for $20 your 1 millionth piece of the Warhol, basically. And what this platform allows, and this is when I talk about the shift from asset to commodity to equity, is that once, after a couple of years, when the Warhol is no longer worth 20 million, it's worth 40 million, you can just sell it on the platform. You don't need to own, you don't need to have it in your house, you don't need logistics, you don't need anything. Everything is sort of instant and very, very fast, very liquid. So we've gone from art as a market, art as an investment, to art as a security, art as a thing that can be traded on a market extremely, extremely fast. Okay, but what about digital art? Financializations begets the digitalization of everything. Because the impetus for finance to have everything sort of on an index, everything being quantified, this pushes the metrification of things like art. I want to take some time to sort of explain what makes digital goods and digital art and digital assets so radically different from their physical counterpart. They are anti-commodity. This is something when we talk about rival goods. Rival goods are goods where your own consumption inhibits another person's consumption, which means that basically, if I have a Warhol, if I have like a Warhol, you don't have it because I have it. I'm the only person who has it. This is what we call the rival goods. Cultural goods, usually something like a movie. Mm-hmm. They're not rival. Everybody can see a movie. I would sort of affirm, or like one of the thesis of this essay is that digital goods, through sort of the network effects of memes, sort of generally speaking, are anti-rival because your consumption of a digital good usually engenders another person's consumption. When you are looking at something online, usually the algorithm pushes it on top because it sees that the viewership for this thing is increasing. So it is the complete opposite of the scarce world of physical goods, thusly anti-rival. In comes our good friend, the blockchain. I'm going to spend a bit of time explaining what it is, because I know that this is the question on everybody's lips. What the hell is the blockchain? And how do I get one of them? So this is a very, very high-level overview of how it works. You have a transaction. The transaction happens on a series of nodes. And because it's decentralized, all the different nodes record the transaction. Once a certain number of nodes verify the transaction, it is written on the ledger which all of these nodes carry. What that means is that the ledger is, because it is on multiple different computers or nodes, it is permanent and unalterable. So what they call tamper-proof. You can't fudge the ledger, and no one has the capacity to sort of falsify or fudge or alter the ledger. So this is blockchain. Are there any questions? Because this is a big part of how sort of the digital art market has found a solution to make these anti-rival goods into rival goods.
Yeah, I actually have a question about blockchain. You hear about kind of Bitcoin mining, which is kind of, just using, computing power or processing power to mine Bitcoins. What exactly is happening when a Bitcoin is being mined? And is there any kind of like, insofar as to an extent, money in the real world is based either on kind of like bonds or gold. Is there any kind of like, objective entity that Bitcoin is based on?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. So what is the value worth on? The value is based on the work it takes to mine a Bitcoin. And the way to mine it is to solve a very, very complex math equation, which requires a lot of computing power, which means that I can't do it on my Mac. You need like literal like servers and very, very large computers to do it. And the sort of input when we talk about sort of Marxist evaluations of things, it isn't quite labor, it's computing power. And that computing power relates to literally electricity. So to mine Bitcoin takes a lot of electricity. And so people will be paying X amount in sort of internet fees to do the mining, electricity. And that is sort of the work that goes into solving those equations that then turn into a Bitcoin. And what this allows, of course, as you mentioned with the Haka piece, is that it allows for sort of transparent traceability. You know who owns it, who has owned it in the past, and you also see the price at which it was exchanged. This is the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. I wanted to present this because this was at a certain point in time the direction that a certain subsection or subgroup of crypto heads were going, which was really sort of against the FANG companies, sort of the large internet conglomerates, and that crypto would be providing this post-Google free trade world. Of course, they mimic the format of the Communist Manifesto. A specter is haunting the modern world, the specter of crypto anarchy, and they end with the arise. You have nothing to lose but your barbed wire fences. But this was very much integral to the sort of spirit of crypto at a certain point. And I want to spend some time also, because this is something that is very dear to me. The internet, in spite of its military origins, had also in its tenets, in its philosophy, this idea of open source, of creating for a community of folks that existed sort of outside of the sort of financial markets or outside of the capitalist world, and who could just trade information, trade pictures, images, on their own behalf without the need to be identified, without the need to be monitored by the state. So it really had this idea, foundational idea which we see things like the Mozilla Foundation, which has a lot of open source projects. Of course, Wikipedia. There's still some remnants of that, but that was a very big part of how people saw both digital creations, digital assets, as being things that we needed to share. And of course, at the arrival of companies like Microsoft and Apple, things like source codes, which were usually shared widely. So when I made software, you would share the source code that somebody else could remix it, do something else with it, right? You can see this a lot in the Creative Commons licenses. But people could take the thing but companies as Microsoft and Apple is extremely hermetic. Like it's very opaque. It's very hard to sort of fudge with your MacBook. You can't really hack it or modify it in the ways that or other computers can. Of course, there's Linux and Ubuntu and other more open source platforms, but the ones that have gotten sort of mainstream acceptance and mainstream usage do not fully they don't really follow the spirit of the open source web and open source technology, which was very present in the 80s and the 90s. All right, back to digital art. There are 5 problems, and this is from a guy named Alain Servet, who's a collector of digital art, specifically video, but that was something that he brought up, which was exhibition rights. If I buy, he's more like 90, so he was talking about someone like Matthew Barney. Like if I buy an edition tape of a Matthew Barney piece, do I have the right to exhibit it? Do I have the right to reproduce it? Do I have the right to talk about it? Like the commons right is communication rights. Do I have the right to resell it? And do I have moral rights? The moral rights mean, am I allowed to change it? Am I allowed to, remix it, change it, whatever? And this is the same problem that I see on the platforms. And I made this like last week. And on Thursday, I was talking to Cassie Reyes, who's working on a project called Feral File, which is a very cool gallery online. But this is something that they've done that I hadn't seen before on the platforms that I'm going to present later on, is that they, with the purchase of each digital art piece, it comes with a contract that clarifies these things. And maybe I'll go and I'll get it later on to show you. But basically, you do not have reproduction rights. You have resale rights, but only on the platform. And you do not have moral rights, so you're not allowed to change the piece. And exhibition rights, you're allowed to exhibit the piece privately and publicly. Here are the ways in which the blockchain solves the 3 problems that I mentioned before about the art market, namely opacity, liquidity, and barrier to entry. Opacity, all the transactions are now recorded on a publicly available tamper-proof blockchain. So whenever there's an interaction, it is recorded on the ledger and everybody has access to that ledger. This is a bit different than the Artsy and ArtRank, in which you sometimes have to, like, they give you like a little taste. You can go and like look for one artist and look at the price history for one artist. But if you want the full thing, you need to pay for the platform. Now, this is publicly available. Barrier to entry. It's a decentralized system, which means that all individuals with an internet connection are able to access these systems. And liquidity, the tokenization of artwork ensures easy transactions. My take is that it not only allows easy transaction, it sort of implies that there will be a transaction, which sort of pushes us further from asset and more towards commodity. Because you have a token, you're sort of encouraged by design to trade it. Now, if you're familiar with the scene, you're going to hear a lot about NFT, non-fungible tokens. Non-fungible tokens are a specific type of cryptocurrency that, as I said here, is unique, cannot be broken down, and cannot be replaced. So whenever a person makes a piece of digital art that is linked to a non-fungible token, the token is the only one that exists and directly represents the work of art. And when the work of art is sold or exchanged, so is the token, and that is where the transaction is recorded on the blockchain surrounding the token. Any questions about that? Okay. An example of something that's fungible, like our money is fungible. If I have a dollar, I can split it into, 100 cents. But that token for that art piece, I cannot break it down. A Bitcoin, I could break it down, actually. It's fungible, but not the tokens. Basically, ownership of a cryptographic key, this is from Monograph, one of the first iterations of non-fungible tokens in the art world. I think this was done by like Rhizome and the New Museum, which are sort of big institutions who work within those fields. It is presented as synonymous of ownership of the original work. To own the work, you have to own the token. This is from Foundation. This is basically their presentation slide of how their platform works. As a collector, you are allowed to go on the platform. You're allowed to discover new artists, collect their work. You can bid on them, buy it, and within the platform, you can also resell it. The main improvement in the economics of art that is presented by this platform is this 10% royalty. Okay, the first guy in the picture, the first painting was a Van Gogh painting, who sort of famously became renowned after his death, which means that his paintings were sold in the what we call the secondary market at auction, direct sales, and his estate, his family got nothing from it. Similarly, even artists that are alive who make a piece, maybe you can sell them in the gallery for like $1,000, 40, 50 years down the line, if it's worth $1 million, you only get the $1,000 you got when you first sold it. Through non-fungible tokens, every time there is a transaction, the artist gets a 10% royalty on all the transactions. That is a great question, Hamzat. I'm going to answer that. I guess I'm going to answer that when I show you. We're going to make, this is a spoiler, we're going to make a token together later on. But yeah, so this changes the way that artists are remunerated for their work, because not only do you get the first sale, you also get, as the value of the piece increases, you also get some money from it. This is, to me, very similar to the idea of a dividend and this is why you saw the chart, we're going towards an equity and not a commodity or an asset. In a stock, every year, if the company is doing well, you get a dividend of X percent. On your, like Coca-Cola has a 3% dividend every year. Coca-Cola, if I own $1,000 of this stock, gives me $30, for instance. As a creator, as you're entering these markets, what you are doing essentially is creating works of which you have a certain equity in, and from which you get a 10% dividend. As they increase in value, the 10%, which was, say if it was $100, $10 at first, it goes to $1 million, becomes $100,000, which sort of radically changes the way we see how an artist can build their career and how they can think about the economics of their own careers. So this is on the artist side. So on the sell side, you mint, so you create your token, you sell it for a starting price. And so this is the answer to your question, Hamzat. You choose the initial value of that token, basically. And you can do both a fixed price or a bid. And if there's a bid, then the market, quote unquote, will decide the final value of that one token. And then you earn, which is sort of this continuous, if there are resales of the piece, royalty that you earn on the thing that you created on your artwork. Does this model, is this model clear to everyone? Good. Bitcoin tokens ended the taboo on money. I like this quote because the problem of opacity in the art world is also a social problem. People don't like to talk about money. They don't like to talk about how much they spend on, well, some people do, but some people don't like to talk about how much they spend on an artwork, how much they spend on a sculpture. And there's, it's hush hush. You don't want to be gaudy. But what this ledger, this Bitcoin, this new technology allows is that all this information is available. So you don't have to communicate it directly, and there's no longer a taboo on what a thing is worth because all these things are inscribed publicly in a ledger. Mask off. To me, and this is, I'm still going to show you how to do it because I do think that digital artists should be paid for their work. I do think, however, that the intertwinement of digital art and cryptocurrency is sort of a mask off, sort of the final stage of the financialization of the art world. This is one of the platforms. This is for better or for worse, and you can make your own opinion about this. Whereas usually people will, as a social interaction, will sort of not necessarily brag about their collections or brag about how much money they make. They'll do it in, surreptitiously, or they'll humble brag or something like that. These platforms, because everything is public, allow for people to see things like that, which means which is the artist that's taking the most money, which person has the biggest collection, and who are the top collectors, which is sort of like a yardstick measuring contest to some extent. And this is essentially also, this to me is no different than the logic of like the Forbes list, where people are trying to have the biggest wealth at the end of the day. So that's why I call the mask off sort of like end stage of the financialization of everything. But do with this what you want. But this is sort of how it sort of is ending up. These are sort of the top artists on Foundation. And I wanted to talk about the economics of how they're pricing their pieces, and whether or not this follows this idea of supply and demand, which we presented earlier on in this piece. Now, you can see here that some of these guys, like Xcopy, Hakatao, have a wide amount of pieces, which means lots of supply. They're still alive. They can still produce. However, they are claiming that they have the highest demand for their work. So what's happening here, right? We thought that when supply is down and demand is up, prices should go up. But now supply is up, demand is up, and the prices are still going up. It should be, in classical economics, the opposite. Which brings us to this very interesting idea that like there's something else influencing the value of digital art. It is not only a supply and demand thing, because by nature, the good is anti-rival. If something is anti-rival, and even if it is made scarce by the token, there's other things that are influencing it. So we talk about the price reference of the other pieces. If something is sold sort of openly at another price, it will influence the price of the next thing that is sold by that person. So the price reference provided by the other multiples. By multiples, I mean additions. And then the multiples, because they're tokens, because they're owned, and because everything is open, creates a kinship between the collectors who can see who owns what, and is a bit different than, say, if you've ever been to Christie's or whatever, like sometimes people have proxies betting for them. So there's a very open kinship and a very open competition between these collectors. But finally, the most important thing is that this idea of exposure and of viewership and how that influences value. This is a theorized equation for how valuations are made in a digital world, which means that you have your coefficient of value here, your n, and with viewership of the piece, value increases. So no matter how many pieces there are, no matter the supply, what really matters is the hype, the viewership, how many people are talking about it. And this is from Cao Yin, who wrote a wonderful piece on Super Rare about this. So we go from hype to viewership to sellability in order to have a new formula, a new economic equation of value that is no longer rooted in this idea of supply and demand, which is sort of how we tend to, quote unquote, justify the valuations of these ridiculous works of art that go for like millions and millions of dollars. And now comes the plot twist. Well, not yet. Next slide comes the plot twist. You can see that in terms of supply, these people are adding like 1 or 2 pieces per week. So we know that there's a constant supply of things coming, but still the valuations are going up. So this is the average amount of new works added per week. Supply and demand does not work here. And what do post-scarcity economics look like? So once goods are no longer scarce, what drives economics? And to me, it is sort of viewership, or you can wrap this into like, the network effects of memetics, of things being spread around virally on the internet, raises the valuation of things. We're post-scarcity and we're in superabundance. And this is the plot twist. So these are some of the names you might have seen on that list of 100 top artists, of which the 2 main ones were Warhol and Picasso. And this also goes to show that in the physical world, this idea of supply and demand is not quite respected, because we do actually have, for these 2 artists, which are quite modern, an overabundance of pieces compared to the other artists here. Which means that what is driving their prices is not necessarily the fact that there's a limited amount of pieces, but that they're talked about the most. This is the list again. But yeah, Picasso and Warhol at first, who have an excess supply of pieces. However, the demand is very high and the prices are still going up. And this was unsolved until I actually talked to Casey Ray, Casey Ray said the other day. But this does not quite solve the problem of collecting, which means that when I buy a piece on Super Rare or on Rareable or whatever, it is quite unclear whether or not I am allowed to open my own museum and show this piece. I'm allowed to change that piece if I don't like it, because like arguably, I could do whatever I want with the art in my apartment. And it is unclear whether or not I'm allowed to reproduce it and I'm allowed to resell it. But this certain new platform is actually coming with sort of very, very clear artist contracts in like plain English, in order to explain what the rights of both the artist and the seller are when the transaction happens. This is the curators at the MOCTA, who is the Museum of Contemporary Digital Art, who said in a editorial on Super Rare, free access and unrestrained production might still work within a very small community, where the limited number of actors involved assures a certain degree of control against forgery and manageability to the space. However, pure decentralization is a utopia. The very existence of online galleries, providing the means to showcase and trade artworks to those unable to program their own smart contracts, is already a restriction, an instance of centralization, if you wish. Actually, all main galleries are themselves created platforms on a decentralized network. Now, the rise in the numbers of artists, collectors, tokenized works in the crypto scene made the unrestricted model clearly unsustainable. Galleries had to develop guidelines against the overproduction of tokenized works while issuing spotlight articles on certain art pieces, creators, or collections. This makes me very angry, because we talked about the sort of initial crypto manifesto. We talked about this idea of like, we want everybody to have access to this platform. We want everyone to be able to mint these tokens, provided they do a bit of like, do a Google search or whatnot. And I was just tweeting about this, but another driver of the economics of these platforms, especially new sectors, is institutional adoption. When institutions come in, like this museum come in, institutions have a vested interest in projecting their model of their model of either economics, or their model of presentation in case of this of organization, to new sectors. And I mean, their curators, their job is to great. I'm going to answer the question in a minute. They have a vested interest in pushing forth the agenda that these centralized galleries are necessary to the well-being of the space as a whole. I disagree. I think that the nature of the decentralized network should be that whoever wants to create should create. And I mean, I have a gallery, but I think that it should still remain within the spirit of the platform or of the system itself, that people should not need to be curated to present their work. They should be able to present their work wherever they want. And yeah, this is to me how you have a great idea that can come up that is supposed to upend the status quo, and slowly but surely, with institutional adoption, you go back to the status quo. And arguably, this is also a problem of, and as they said, it's a problem of supply. And you see this in most digital goods. When there's an increased supply and an increased amount of people, for instance, going on Substack, an increased amount of people doing podcasts, what do you see? You see bundling happening. You see people getting together and creating neat packages of things that are similar. And this is something sort of like that that the gallery or the curator tends to do, which is create these bonds between these disparate sort of heterogeneous things, and sort of makes them creates connections between them. Anyway, this is the part of the talk where I rant a bit, but back on track. There are some truly open platforms. And I'm going to present OpenSea and Rarible, where anyone can go, because right now, if you go on Super Rare or Foundation, there is a curational board that decides who gets to be presented on there or not. And of course, because as we've seen, what are the economic drivers of sales? What do we think are the curatorial criteria that people are looking at when decided which artwork gets to be on the cool, nicely designed platform? Of course, it is viewership, hype, and sellability, which arguably is the same thing for regular galleries, but this was supposed to upend that. This was supposed to sort of subvert that. But OpenSea, Rarible, and many others also provide wonderful platforms for people to mint their own tokens and present their works in whatever space they want. This is one of my big questions, which I talk on a monthly basis with other curators who are trying to wrap their heads around what to do, how to show digitally. We started this in COVID, actually. So how to show online, what should we do, etc. But one of the main things is, why are we trying to render scarce something that is by design infinite? I don't have the answer. The only actual answer that I've heard, which is a valid answer, is we are trying to render it scarce because we want artists to eat. Like, we want them to have some kind of revenue. And unless things are made scarce, it is hard to justify selling something that is not scarce. Yeah, that's the one thing that I've heard. But this is sort of an open question that I'm opening the floor to anyone who has any idea about this. But yeah, and who polices the moral rights? That's an excellent question. So if you were to buy a painting, no one, because you can do whatever you want with it. We've had, I think, instances of, somebody in an apartment gets shot and the painting has a bullet hole in it. That's something that can happen. Kids ruining artwork happens also. Now, when it comes to either digital art or software, or the only thing that we have is the record of what the thing was. So the source code of the thing, and then once the transaction is happening on a platform like Feral File, they probably sort of match the new file with the old file. And with anything on your computer, you can see the history of the edits that have been made, and that is how it is. It's only policed at the time of transaction, basically. In the middle, technically, you could do whatever you want with it. it only really matters if the thing, if the good is, the artwork is sold again. Does that make sense? Because one thing that they could do is something that they used to do. Oh, one thing that they could do, something that they used to do with music is, you know, add CRM. So restrictive technology within the CD that you can't copy it, you can't change it, which was a big thing in 2000s, but we rarely see people do this anymore. Yeah, that's my big question. That's my big problem. And this is similar to what we were saying before. The tokenization of digital assets imports the logic of scarcity inherited from the initial paradigm to the informational domain in direct antithesis to the fluidity, the mutability of digital medium, which is by definition, you know, mutable, changeable, remixable, all the words that are used in the Creative Commons license. So to me, I agree with Lorelotti, who is like an amazing researcher on these topics. This goes against the design of digital goods. What happens when the NFT when a work is altered? That's a great question. The NFT is not like the gift or the video or the MP4 file itself. It is just the token representing the ownership of that piece. Now, this is also a big issue here, is that if you lose the file, and I don't know, so this is something that I brought up last Thursday as well. We know how like the internet works. You know, you have new platforms coming up every day, and in about 2 years, you get these emails saying, "We've had a wonderful ride. Thank you so much for your support, but we're stopping this. You know, they're going belly up." As a curator, what is very important to me, and it's an extremely great question, is who will preserve, who is responsible for the curare, to take care of these pieces once the platforms have defunct. Same thing we've seen with Flash. Of course, Rhizome, the new museum, have done amazing work preserving some of these. But is the platform responsible for that preservation so that if the work is indeed altered, you have a way to get it back? You get the original file. I don't have the answer to that, but that's an extremely valid question, which if you're an investor, you would definitely want to have an answer to. Does it become a new work with a new NFT? I mean, if it is altered by another sort of known artist, that could be a thing. But the NFT is only really the ownership of that original work. So I think it would give you recourse to ask the platform to look into their archives and give you the original file again. But besides that, I'm not sure. Do you foresee any alteration in how digital art is accessed? Jules, you're way ahead. This is the alternative models of sort of funding digital art, which we're coming to at the end. But yes, we can see other methods of sort of funding artistic endeavors, and we're going to be talking about the streaming model, sort of Sedition, and another website called DAATA Data, as well as stuff like Patreon and distributed autonomous organizations, DAOs, and sort of social tokens for communities who can create their own little internet island with their own tokens and then fund with their token artists to do stuff. Demonstration time. All right. You're here because you wanted to learn something. And so I'm going to show you how to do this. If you already know, I'm sorry. If you don't, I hope you enjoy these two links, which are very user-friendly, and will show basically how to, I'm going to share my whole screen. So Rarible is very cool because it is community owned. It's sort of like a co-op version of an NFT marketplace. And the co-op, in a sense, has its own token. So their token is called, can you see? Oh, now you can see, right? So the co-op in itself has its own token, which they share, which is called Rari, or Rari, for which all the pieces share. OpenSea is one of the OGs of the platform, and on OpenSea, you can create a collection, and you can create a piece. For this, I made an example here in which I created a little thing, collection works a bit on Sultan Gallery. This is for the purpose of presentation, but you can have your piece and you present it on it, you choose the price. This is 1 Ethereum. You could choose to do 2 things. You could choose to, you could just do an addition on Rarible, which means you make multiples, like a print, like a silk screen, whatever. And on OpenSea, you usually have only 1. And it's free. Usually you have to pay to do the minting, but on OpenSea, it is free. And so let's go back. I would like add a new item, drag the file. So you have all the different file types which that they can support, put the name of it, and the copy of the supply is only 1. Similarly, on Rarible, you have 2 options. Which you get single or multiple. And so when you do that, you have the option to either create your own token, for which you'll have your own image, your own symbol, you can describe it. And it's also on the Ethereum blockchain, which is another type of blockchain. So similar to Bitcoin. And yeah, you could put it on sale, you could have a bid price, and you can decide the future royalties which you will collect on future sales of the piece. This is a quick little demonstration of if any of you create digital art, want to find a way to market it, that can work. And these 2 I like because community owned and OpenSea is like free, versus something like Foundation where, you know, they've got the nice fonts, so you know it's going to be gate kept. But yeah, you have the artwork, but not everyone can sell on it. And we're going to go back to the presentation. Okay, could the same artwork be sold on different platforms? The same token, so OpenSea allows you to link your tokens from, they have like a slew of different minting websites from which you can link the token to OpenSea. So it can come from Rarible, and come from other platforms. And so you can link them so that you have access to different marketplaces. Now the question is, could you like quote unquote cheat and sell it on one thing and sell it on the other? Because arguably yes, but they would not be like, the tokens would be different in that scenario. If you create a token on Rari, you put the GIF there and you put, technically these would be like two different tokens. So yeah, nothing is stopping you from doing that except for your like conscience, I suppose, in the same way that you can like reproduce the painting, or if you're very good, you can do the same one and sell it again. I suppose that is also possible in the physical world. So I'm going to go back to full screen. And I'm going to open the chat again. Oh, Ash G, very, very good question. Who's collecting digital art? So there's two answers to that question. The first question is, technically we don't know, because most of like blockchain interactions are either made through pseudonyms or are anonymous. So you have like on something like Foundation or Super Rare, you have the name of the collectors, but you don't actually know who they are. Some people are quite overt about it. They'll write articles, tweet about it. So you have the community of collectors for NFTs, for non-fungible tokens, is just like anyone. They have their own Discords. They talk about the stuff that they buy. How's it mainly experienced? It depends for all people. Some people, if they're buying videos or gifts, can play it on their TV at home. Some people are will like show it to people when they come to their houses. Some people are buying purely off of this idea of like valuation. I presume that this would affect the valuation of the art. This idea that it can be presented. So, I mean, the numbers that we've seen are quite high. Like, I don't think that is something that people are worried about. It seems to me that there's some kind of camaraderie in the crypto space. That if I'm selling a unique piece, I'm not going to reproduce it and sell it somewhere else, because that would also affect, especially because it's a community that's in its infancy. If I were to do that and get caught, it would probably affect my rep as well. So somewhat of an honor system. But yeah. Lower Lottie again, in order to break away from the entanglement with market logic, artists have started exploring the possibilities of blockchain technology and its promise of peer-to-peer disintermediated value creation and transmission as a way to move beyond the financialization of art. Post-blockchain. So, sorry for the expletive, but Bitcoin was an early experiment in blockchain that was done. It's always the same people: New Museum, Rhizome, Crowd, New York. But each coin pre-mined by the artist gives access to a piece of the art of the like a series from the artist, but perpetually, which means that you can redeem your piece at any point in time from that series. The coin and the artwork can be exchanged, and basically this is something we call staking. So you're staking by the purchase of this coin, and this could be done project-based. So if you're doing a series, say on crows, in any given time, I can exchange that coin for one of the pieces of that series. This is also similar to the equity model, in which by giving them $1,000 right now, they can make their series, and whenever I want, whenever I have the space in my house or whatever, I will redeem the piece. And this is different because this provides the artist with a startup capital in order to execute the project. So right now with the tokens, you do the thing, you mint the token, and afterwards you sell it. With this, if I need $100,000 to do my project, I can mint 100 coins for $1,000, and then people can claim whenever the project is done, whenever the pieces have been created, they can claim their piece, or they can wait. And this has the advantage, of course, of providing authenticity and provenance. Social tokens, for instance, Trevor, I don't know what his last name is, but Friends with Benefits is an example of a social token, which is, I think, very, very cool, in which people of similar interests, Meg Freedies, exactly, come together on an like either an online platform like a Slack or a Discord, and membership is based on token ownership. And so once you're in that group, the community has a certain amount of tokens which are worth a certain amount of thing. For example, when I joined, so Friends with Benefits, the token was worth like about $1.50 US, and they had X amount of it, and now it's worth about $7, which means that they've now appreciated. Now they're able to, and this is because the cryptocurrency went up, but they're now able to fund certain projects through a governance board inside of the community and pay artists that way to create work, or writers or stuff like that. And this is more cooperative, more community-based than simply just minting and selling. And chances are, if you are creating something within a community of people who like you or have similar interests, they're more also willing to buy it. Each coin gives access to a community. Community gains in value based on participants in their projects. You're staking not in an individual's future, like the Bitcoin, but in a community's future. So a bit sort of a wider net. Initial coins offerings, also known as ICOs, is similar to the idea of an initial public offering. So the coin or the share gains value based on the product, on the project's dissemination exposure. So you're owning a share in the work or in the project. So you have a vested interest in sort of talking about it, sort of sharing it with other people. And so this puts you and the artist in sort of a mutually aligned interest, which is how I would call that. But yeah, this is also a cool thing. Also, the advantage here is that the startup capital is upfront. You know, similar to what the grants do when you have a research grant from the Calc or whatever. You get money to do your project, and you're not ruining yourself when you're creating. So this is, to me, perhaps avenues to the problem of collecting art, moving from marketplace to community. We sort of have the study of reproduction rights and resale rights. Once things are ingrained in this idea of community or of mutually aligned or of congruously aligned interests, we can create relationship-based technology. So another project that Laura Lottie mentioned was this sort of autonomous so distributed organization in which somebody could stake, and the organization created art, and then you can, through your ownership of that organization, have ownership of the art. So once relationship is sort of engaged with the artist, things like comms right, moral rights, and exhibition rights can be much more clearer, because these are sort of ingrained in the acts or the constitution of the community. This can be decided by the board or by the governance body of the community. I will now open the floor for questions.
Ash, do you have a question?
Yes. So can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'm just not sure. Can we see me? Okay. Maybe I missed an important part, or basically, how can digital art thrive? Like, let's say, an artist makes a digital piece that becomes really popular, and everybody wants a piece of it, something like that. How can it really thrive when MP3s and videos and movies haven't been able to overcome the issue of piracy, online piracy, digital piracy, right? And a lot of the music, no, wait, I'm going a bit too fast. So I noticed that in niche music genres, if the music is not popular enough, there aren't enough people who are distributing the music illegally, right? Piracy, like, so like in electronic music, if there's only like 1,000 people that are all really into this electro, artists, you won't be able to just like torrent it easily. You're forced to, well, not forced, but you can only find it on Bandcamp, right? But once the artist becomes big enough, then it starts popping up in illegal sites where you can torrent that digital art, right? So, and then when you look at much bigger, more popular entity like digital art, like movie or like a Taylor Swift album, right? They become so big that the piracy, the music that's being pirated, like doesn't really completely destroy their bottom line. So they can afford for their art to get pirated or whatever, They already have a major company that finance even the production of their art, right? So your movie is getting pirated, but the director still got paid, millions of dollars by the, the distribution, the production house, the all the big companies in order to create that art. So I'm trying to understand how that will look like, or scale down to like some of the digital art that I saw on the website you just showed, the Rare or something, right? Where it's like these GIFs almost, or like these maybe even like AI face kind of technologies. I remember I had a class on digital art, or like just like contemporary art, and like some of the stuff that we were looking at, we still had a sort of a physical thing. There's still like, it was maybe like a computer, right? So the person who's getting this digital art, like they also had the computer that would project the thing, right? They had the robotics. They had something that was still sort of unique to it, right? The code could be copied, but not the physical thing, right? So I'm trying to understand if people can just copy and share and distribute through piracy, like how isn't that going to hurt? No, like how is digital art going to thrive?
So that's a great question. And this is like an issue I think the music industry has had for ever since Napster came on the scene. We could talk about for one moment their solution. Their solution is happening right now, which is Spotify. They've effectively pushed people towards a model of convenience through streaming that provides everyday people and mind you, you talk about niche communities. I think that certain artists are not on Spotify for sure. And the further you go, the nicher you go, perhaps they're not on there. But for most folks who, like, I used to, torrent Sean Paul. Like now, I will just go on Spotify and find it. And I don't think Sean Paul is on Bandcamp, though he should be. But I think so. The first thing that's happened now is you have two platforms. One is called Sedition. The other is called Data, DAATA, which I was going to show you. They've emulated this format in that you pay a monthly subscription to have access to the platform, and then you have a slew of different digital artists who come on there, and you can, in the case of Data, you can buy the piece and keep it in your data vault. I'm not sure. And I mean, in terms of piracy, the good itself is reproducible. Like if you're getting like a GIF or a video or something like that, dissemination, as we saw in the equation, viewership squared times the coefficient equates the value. So piracy in that equation, in that post-scarcity mindset, actually increases viewership and thusly increases the value of the work. The value is actually only accrued by two people: the person who owns the token, who will potentially sell it in the future, and the artist, who will get 10% of that sale in the future. That's sort of the solution, is that if you don't base your model of ownership just on the fact that like you have the file, but also on the fact that the file needs to be shared widely, then piracy kind of plays into that. Does that answer your question?
Not really, because it's like, see, like coming back to the niche music, right? If it's so niche, at some point, they will only sell vinyl records. There's only 300 copies of this record, right? So, okay. I'm trying to understand how the one person who owns that digital art, what real value do they have over the person who just literally pirated it, right? They only get the reputation. Is their value the reputation? So is it kind of like you mentioned Spotify? It's like, okay, now people don't. Why would they own the music when they can stream it, right? Why am I going to own? Yeah. Why am I going to buy it when I can stream it at any time, right? I'm just licensing it, right?
Yeah, so it's a foundation. It's a foundational question. It's like, why do I want to buy this, especially for these prices? Like, why would I buy this token for $1,000 when, buddy, I can just screenshot it? It's a very, very valid question. And you know, when I talk about the link from financial to spiritual, you just have to believe in it, essentially.
But it's like, are you consuming it, or are you just like, are you consuming because you like the art, or are you just like, I'm making money off of this?
There's two types of people in the world, or maybe more than that, but there's two types of people on these platforms. So certain people who are doing it as an investment, certain people who just really love it.
But which does it encourage?
I think it encourages the people who invest. As I've said, that's why I showed you the UX of the website. You see which artist is making the most money. You see whose collection is the biggest. You see the top collectors. I think that the design of these websites, the user interface, the user experience, pushes you towards a competition with other collectors, and therefore, encourages you and engenders more purchases, more bids.
But doesn't that sound crazy to you? That just sounds like multi-level marketing. That's what it is.
Well,
I mean,
can I ask a question slash maybe a related possible answer?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So to me, it seems like what you're doing when you're buying the work on one of these sites and you get that token is that you're kind of buying like the clout of being like, I was here first. Like, I knew this was going to blow up. And like, as it gets pirated or like distributed through, you know, illegal methods or non-official methods, and people are like appreciating this work, you're the one that holds a token that says like, I was there like when the artist sold it. I mean, they do know the price because it's on the public network. And so then somebody could even become like maybe a tastemaker, and you see they have all these tokens for popular works that they bought for such price. And so you're like, wow, they bought this gift at $1,000 and it's worth however much now. And they have a whole bunch of these collected. So then people start following them as like an eye to what's going to be a good investment next, and I don't know, something like that. So you're buying clout.
Yeah, and not only that, this is where it becomes very, very transparent that this is the logic of the securitization of the art market, because what is happening right now I'm going to talk about stocks for a second, and how what you described here is basically what's happening with many of the companies that people are investing in. So in a sense, what you said is that if you are only buying in the hope of selling at a higher price, it's almost like an MLM. It's almost like a multi-level marketing scheme, in that you're only hoping you're not going to be the last sucker, basically. So what you have right now is a series of companies that have come onto the financial market, who a lot of them don't make any money, do not provide dividends. I mean, you're not getting any return on your investment on a yearly basis. And the only reason why you're buying a company like Uber is off of this fiat, off of this faith that next year it's going to be worth more money. And
I'm
so
actually really into the stock market. I know about.
that to me that's why I like show you. I wanted to show the index, because basically a lot of people who are even buying physical art are also buying into this last sucker mentality, which is, I'm buying the Warhol now because I know there's another sucker is going to buy it for more in the future. And once we apply the logic of the market to everything in our lives, I think we're sort of stuck in that recurring logic forever. I don't know how to escape it. I think some of these, the Bitcoin and DAOs and certain types of coins can sort of move us further from that. But you're very right in a sense of like, there is no intrinsic value like in what we are buying. We are buying into a future promise. I think that you are also perhaps buying in the, like when I speak to other curators, they say like they want to pay artists. You're also buying in the community of art makers who make digital art, and you're buying, like when you're buying $1,000 and they're getting, I don't know, 95% of that, whatever system they're using, you're also giving them money. And you're also saying, I think this is worth something. I think your work, your labor is worth something, and I'm willing to give you money for that. And I think that's like the most important part, like beyond sort of the ridiculousness of the financial market. As a community of digital artists, of digital curators, or whatever, I think we have to encourage one another. And this is one of the ways we found to do it. I don't think it's optimal or ideal, but I do think that it is one way to support people who make stuff you like.
Well, it's just because if you want to talk about like cloud and be like, oh, I was the first one here, like, why would you pay for it versus just screen capping and starting an Instagram account? Because that's what so many people are doing these days. When you look at memes, actually, you see people who are literally just screen capping and ripping other people's content, but by becoming a feed and establishing their, you know, they become a curator, an online curator, but they didn't have to pay for anything. So it's like, if that's happening there, like, like I just can't imagine how people are being like, oh no, I'm going to pay for digital art instead versus just.
Hey, Ash, I think I might have, like, I had a very similar question to the question that you're asking, and if I have you correct, I think I might be able to shed some light that was kind of shed for me. But like, I think the way that, and it only kind of makes sense. Like, I'm still like kind of skeptical, as it sounds like you are as well right now. But like, I think what a token does, is that it allows the person who purchased it to own the original contract that actually has some monetary value. So the reproductions are reproductions, and they're like essentially the same thing, but like the screen cap doesn't have the contract. The screen cap doesn't have the value. And that's the distinction between like this NFT that's like grounded in like some value versus like a reproduction of it that isn't. Does that make sense?
And I'm sorry, I forgot that I was supposed to mention Benjamin,
Right.
because like similarly, you know, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, anybody can buy like an image of a Matisse and put it in their house. Even now, you can even buy these printers that print with paint strokes, whatever. You can even buy like a very, very good copy of an art piece. I think what Benjamin talks about is how the original work, especially because of the locus, because of the place in which it is housed, and because of the experience of seeing it, has an aura to it. So the token is the technological sort of the technological equivalent of what I think Benjamin would call the aura. It is this undescribable thing that exists only within the token. But just like many people have said criticizing Benjamin, is that like now works of art change places multiple times in our world. They go from museum to museum. So are you really getting the aura of a piece once it's done, like the 10 top museums in North America? That's a very valid criticism of that argument. But I think this is what it harkens to, this idea that there's something essential which you can capture once you see something in its original state.
But that's exactly why digital media can be duplicated completely, right? Unless the original creator never shares the full high-res, version of their content,
But there's only one copy. Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here because I'm having a couple thoughts. First of all, like what we see in the non-digital art market is like an insane value bubble. We're already seeing that in the market that isn't directly linked, that isn't kind of like as easily reproducible, whatever. And on the one hand, you can attribute that to the fact that most Warhols are physical, even though that was an early example of like insane reproducibility. Most paintings are physical, sculptures are physical, whatever. And so there is an extent to which scarcity plays into their valuation. But as Justice, like the point that Justice was making earlier is that there's an extent to which an artwork is invested with value over and above the value that it has as an artwork. It's invested with value because it becomes like a commodity and then an equity in the market. It's invested with value so that it can keep producing its own value. Like its value becomes, abstracted from artistic value and becomes invested with the value of capital. And I think that what we're seeing, and the thing about kind of, albums and movies, the reason that they're so easily pirated is that people actually really want to experience them. And I'm not saying that people don't want to experience artworks. People obviously love looking at artworks. They love being inspired by artworks. But there's an extent to which the value of an artwork, I think because it requires kind of like, it requires less duration to actually appreciate, and it is significantly more easily tradable. So it becomes to accrue different, it starts to accrue different kinds of value. And I think that I'm wondering to what extent the valuations of digital artworks are like blowing up on the same scale that the valuations of physical artworks are, because if there's one thing that physical artworks are definitely, we've seen in the past 20 odd years, like it's not only artists that are dead can no longer produce art. It's not only that kind of scarcity contributing to the value, it's the fact that they are literally just being used as liquid assets. And, people with, they're being used to launder money pretty much, is why a lot of physical art is gaining value. I'm wondering if digital art is kind of exploding in value on the same scale, kind of. And another thing that I think, another point that I think that Justice was kind of make is that, the artistic value of the work aside, what artists and creators and gallerists and collectors get from investing in digital art is not only kind of the capacity to experience the artwork itself, it's the capacity to invest in an environment wherein like the creation of artworks is possible. So if we keep buying art, if we keep investing in the space wherein art can be made, then, some of us just want to make money. Some of us want to look at the art. Some of us just, some of us value the capacity to, some of us just value the capacity to make any money off our art, like, to an extent that is kind of aside from the actual value that you get from experiencing an artwork. Does that make sense? Is that convoluted?
No, it makes
am I
sense,
misrepresenting anything?
but now you just sound like you're talking about Patreon, right?
I'm not talking about Patreon.
No, in the sense of like, I see a lot of similarities between doing that and just directly sending the artist money, and then you get credited as like, oh, the artist, like, I like to thank my Patreon subscribers.
And like, so that's what basically something like Bitcoin or like some of these post-blockchain solutions do, is that they allow you to give money not to the artwork itself, but either to the community of artists or either to the artist as an individual, the artist qua token. There are some like technical solutions that I forgot to mention that I have in my notes now. So there's resolution as proof of ownership. That's one of the things that sometimes happens, is that what you see on the website is a compressed image. What you're getting, if it's a GIF or an image, whatever, you're getting like max resolution. But of course, like, and you can also think about it this way, because so these works are original works in the sense that they're newly presented works, and so it would require the owner to put it on a seat, like the owner has to seed it if they want to torrent it, basically, unless their like computer is hacked. And then what else did I have? Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's like it's investing in the community, in a community that you want to see prosper, that you want to see succeed. And unfortunately, this watermark, like Aaron Taylor, who's a friend of mine, like notoriously trademarks their like watermarks their memes, but people want to see people within their structures or their groups sort of succeed. So that's one of the reasons. And yes.
So are you rebuying art from so, you know, like if I buy your art and then like if someone else wants to support you as an artist, I'm gonna resell them what I own from you as the artist, or
not necessarily. So it depends how you see it, because like, so it depends what kind of person, because if you want to invest in the equity of an artist, you see people do this, like wealthy people do this, they don't really care what they're buying as long as it's that name, you know. So they will buy whatever new piece from, you know, Robert Nava or whatever, just because they believe in the valuation of that artist. And so if I'm a lover of Robert Nava, I will perhaps want a specific thing. And that's when like the secondary markets come into place, because like I will want to buy something specific. Same thing with digital art. If I love Robbie Baya, who like is one of the top artists there, but he's like, he was doing the Balenciaga show before this, like the things that this person makes are like amazing. And 10% usually. And so I might just be like enamored with the stuff that this person makes and want something specific. So I will go and try to find it on the secondary markets. So I'm only giving sort of 10% of that transactions afterwards. But of course, the owner of the token needs to want to sell it as well. And these are all valid. And this is why I love having these discussions, because these are all valid. There are points of contention within this. This is absolutely not a perfect system. And there are a lot of flaws. And in the same way that like, even now, certain people like Kevin O'Leary still does not believe in Bitcoin, you know, will go on CNBC and be like, I don't get this crypto thing, you know, like, there's still a lot of skepticism, and it is still a rather complex technical thing to comprehend and to wrap your head around. And I still don't know like half of it.
Like, why would you not want to just sell your digital art to everyone who wants it instead of only transferring ownership to or licensing to one person?
Because that's markets. I mean, that's just market saturation. That, like, you know, if you sell it to everyone who wants it, then the value goes down significantly, as opposed to kind of maintaining a system wherein an artwork can not only accrue value, but also be distributed so as to be enjoyed by multiple people.
It's like finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
And so you remember that graph? It's like they're still producing. People are doing multiples on like found on all these websites. So there's like an edition could be like an edition of, you know, 100. Like, you can make an edition of 1,000. A lot of, you know, like Dali used to make editions of thousands and stuff like that. So you can actually reach, and that was a lot of artists made editions and made multiples because they wanted to reach a wider area of folks with their art, and also reduces the price. So you can do that. Now, people also have made open editions, and I can totally see this happening with something like this. There are a lot of artists who do open editions, which are just like the pieces here, you can buy it as many times as you want. And that is also a model we see in physical art. It has not yet been reproduced within the frame of digital art, but I can totally see it happening. For an artist that is famous enough, they can definitely make an open edition for their work.
Oh my God. Okay.
So yeah, we've got about, we've been going for almost 2 hours. I just want to know does anyone else have any questions or kind of last points or anything of that nature? Because I think we might want to start wrapping up soon, just for the sake of I don't know, eye strain. Anyone else?
I have just a quick question for Justice, if you don't mind. You use like the word digital artist a lot. And I'm just curious, like, how you define that word and where you draw the distinction between like someone who makes work and publishes it online versus someone whose like final product is a digital file. Just like, how do you define that word or like that phrase, digital artist?
You know, there was going to be a slide in this that said all art is now digital, especially in the age of COVID. In a sense that like in a sense that when you are experiencing the work of art in a context in which you can no longer go to galleries or on a platform like Artsy or an art rank, like I can buy something, like I could buy a Simone Leigh and just like from the website until it's delivered to my house. And so like the space in which I'm experiencing it, and it's still, because it's extremely liquid, because it is represented online, and because in the same instant I could also sell it back, to me it simulates the flow of digital artwork. It's just not reproducible. But to me, it's not necessarily pure play, but it has its main medium of representation is technological medium, so like a screen or some kind of like some electronic device.
And it was like designed or made to be displayed on a screen specifically, as opposed to being shown in. Okay.
There's a lot of people who do like in betweens, like wearable tech or like wearable tech art or 3D printing, stuff like that.
Okay.
And okay, for the record, also, physical art can also be, not to start another conversation, but could also be tokenized.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Right. So like, if I'm painting and I want to assert the provenance and the authenticity of my work, and I know that I'm going to be working with my gallery for a long time, I can require everybody who sells and resells my pieces to, or like as with the contract of sale of the artwork, that each transaction be recorded on a blockchain ledger, which is also something that people have been doing.
But if that is done, is like what's being written on the ledger like monetary value, or just like it went from like Bob to
monetary value and owner?
Okay, so that means they're paying for the work in Bitcoin or Ethereum.
not necessarily. There's a company called Bitmark who does that. It's people are trying to find ways to solve the issues that we have with the art market. Namely, is this a real piece? Who are the people who own it before? Which are the two big questions when you want to spend $1 million on something. You want to know who was the previous owner and how much they paid for it. So
Right.
putting everything on a blockchain that you cannot tamper with is a solution that certain companies, and this is all in infancy in the sense that people are trying to sell this as this is the solution for the art market. Is it? I don't know, but they're getting venture capital funding for it, so they must be doing something right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Cool. I'm gonna stop the recording now.